Welcome to the Table Tennis Chump To Champ Podcast. Follow our journey through the world of competitive table tennis as mediocre chump players hoping to one day become a champ. Today, we're discussing something we didn't really think about when we started competitive table tennis, and it's something we may be a little embarrassed to admit, but it's impacted both of us on our quest to become a table tennis champ. So, welcome to my co-host Jeremiah, and what is the topic we're talking about today?
Hey everybody, we are back, and today we are talking about injury.
Injuries.
We're talking, we
can
got
you believe
elbow.
it? Injured in injured playing
Yeah.
ping pong.
Yep, there's all sorts of injuries you can experience. Let's see, we got elbow injuries, we got knee injuries. You could have pinky toe injuries. All sorts of things could happen. So where do we want to begin here?
So like I said, we've both been impacted by injuries in some way. So why don't we start with you, Jeremiah? So you're currently dealing with, or I haven't gotten the update. Are you recovered? Are you still dealing with it? And what's your injury?
Yes, the inspiration for today's episode. Me. I currently have tennis elbow, but I think it's actually starting to recover. It's feeling better, but it took forever to get to where I'm at now. I did not realize that tennis elbow was one of those injuries that it can take months. I think it started like 2 months ago where I just started to feel some pain, and it's just been slow recovery ever since.
Okay. So how would you describe the pain? And did you just feel it when you're playing table tennis or in other activities or on your work or what?
I feel like I noticed it more in other activities, and it wasn't even really complex activities. Like, I don't know, just moving things around, or even just like lifting up the TV remote to turn the TV on. It was just a really harsh pain in my elbow area. But the thing that was really odd was that when I extended my arm, straightened it out, I felt a shooting pain into the back of my hand. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, what is this? Of course, you look up all the symptoms of tennis elbow and you find out, oh, this is what tennis elbow is. Okay, great. And then you look up how long it takes to heal. And it can be a long time. It can take like 6 months. Craziness. So have you ever experienced tennis elbow, Michael?
So, on my front, I have not had tennis elbow, but I've had
lucky.
something similar. So that was tendonitis in my wrist, which I think is a very similar feeling. But whereas what you're feeling in your elbow, I was experiencing that in my wrist. So let's see, how did this develop for me? So it was back in 2017, I think, the first year of the teams tournament. So, we had a group of we had 5 guys, and, we were all at the club. We decided to join this huge, teams tournament, this international tournament. I think it was in the 6 months up to that, we signed up and we're all trying to ramp up and improve our skills. So I think during that time, I'm practicing even more and more. We're all getting excited, or at least I am. I remember being really excited.
Yep.
I was
practice.
Playing the league. We were doing some separate practice sessions, and then a month in, so it's like maybe 3 or 4 months before the teams tournament, like my first big tournament, and then suddenly I'm hitting my forehand and my wrist starts hurting on my forehand. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? How's this possible? I mean, I'm just hitting this tiny little ball. How's this tiny dinky little ball causing this pain in my wrist? What is happening? So that's kind of how what happened to me.
And did you notice that did this pain bother you only during table tennis, or did it also affect you in your day-to-day?
So for me, it was most prominent when the ball was striking the paddle, that little impact, and that the angle of the force of that, or I guess I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it was mainly when playing table tennis. And throughout the day, I didn't really feel it. But if I manipulated my wrist at a certain angle, put the pressure on at the same point, kind of simulating what would happen, as I was hitting the ball, I would feel a little pain there. And it wasn't it was kind of like a sharp pain. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't like, but it was definitely like it didn't feel comfortable. There was kind of like a minor sharp pain, and I was definitely scared because I was like, oh shoot, like if I keep doing this, am I gonna like destroy my wrist? Am I gonna be like permanently damaged?
Yeah, that was definitely one of my concerns when it came to, first off, I self-diagnosed myself with tennis elbow. For all we know, it could not be.
Wait,
But
interesting. So you have not been to a doctor at all? Is that what you're saying?
that is correct. I have
Okay.
not. It's just it's it's one of those things where you experience these symptoms and you look on the internet and you're like, well, those symptoms line up exactly with what I have. So I just kind of stated it for myself that I have tennis. Did you go to a doctor for your wrist?
So I did, and I think that does
Oh,
kind of make sense, Jeremiah, because so I did go to the doctor, and I think at the time I really didn't know what tendonitis was. So I really had no idea what was going on. I went to the doctor, and then he's like, "Oh, I think you have tendonitis." And then I looked it up, and that was very consistent,
mm,
with my symptoms. But I will say that like ultimately what he told me to do, he just said, "Oh, you just need to like rest for a little bit."
yeah, just don't do that.
Yeah,
Stop
just
doing the
just
thing.
stop doing the thing you think that caused it. And I described the things that I do, and he's like, "Yeah, it's probably the table tennis. So you should just lay off that for a while." And then he did give me like a little brace thingy, or like had me
Mm.
buy a brace thingy, which was like $80 or something, and
Oh
basically
wow.
just kind of holds your wrist more in place, which in theory will help you recover faster if you're like minimizing use,
Yeah.
of the wrist. And I bet with the elbow, you could do something similar, but I mean, do I feel like it's totally necessary? I'm probably not. So yeah,
So,
so I did go to the doctor, and that's all it did for me.
so did you discontinue table tennis when you're like kind of in this healing phase, or were you still playing?
So yeah, I definitely like tried to stop for a while, but we had this tournament coming up in like 3 or 4 months. So I'm like,
Oh
oh
yeah, that's
gosh, like
unfortunate.
what do I need to like? Okay, I need to try to be recovered for the tournament, but I'd like to get as much practice in as I can. But I don't want to practice now and then like totally screw up myself for the tournament.
Yeah.
So it's like this balancing act. So I think what I ended up doing is like probably for 1 month I didn't play at all, and then it was improving a little bit, and I could hit a little bit. But then it was like I could hit for like 15 minutes, and then it started hurting again. So then it
Oh.
was that balancing act. Like, okay, do I wait? I'll wait a little bit longer, then try it out again, and then see if I can play for longer, or just play for like 15 minutes, like twice a week for now. So
Mhm.
I remember being in this balancing act during that few months period, and kind of what happened, it did eventually like get a little bit better. And then luckily at the teams tournament, I remember mostly not being impacted by it. I think at the end, because it's like 3 days of intense playing. I think on the
Yeah.
third day, I
I'm kind of
started feeling it a little bit.
I'm kind of surprised that you having that rest in between like was enough time to recover at least enough to play.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So I think it was crucial that I took it easy. It was probably for like 2 months or so. And just like towards the end of this 2 months, I started gradually easing back into playing.
mm,
But then, yeah, by the time of the tournament, which is maybe like 4 months later, I was basically fine. I think like after the end of the third 3 days, it was starting to hurt. So then I think after the tournament, I rested a little bit again. But then, yeah, it's basically been fine since. And I have noticed sometimes I redevelop a little bit of pain in my wrist, but it's never been to the point where it was at that time. And the other thing I realized is actually, in terms of the cause of the tendonitis, I think probably playing table tennis is somewhat of it, but I actually find what triggers that pain in my wrist is like lifting heavy objects in a certain way. So
oh,
if I think back to 2017, my other main hobby at the time, I was racing go-karts. Um,
okay.
and the go-karts, well, when you're driving it, you use your wrist a little bit, but the go-kart is like 185 pounds. And when I was racing the go-karts, I was constantly lifting the cart up and down. There's like a go-kart stand that you like put the go-kart on and then take it down to go run your session,
So
um,
this would like really aggravate it doing this.
yeah, I think that may have been the main trigger, but then table tennis was like at compounding it.
Yeah, because you're doing like the same motions repeatedly and using
Yeah,
a lot of wrist. Because I know you were doing a lot of backhand at that time too, right? You were trying to work on your backhand.
yeah, and I think that's the other thing. I wonder if some of the technique things I was working on like also made it worse. I know that I remember with my backhand, I wouldn't feel the pain, but it could have been the motions I was doing with my backhand, were triggering something weird in that flexors in my wrist or
Yeah.
whatever you call it.
I would like to say that, Michael, you are a true team player. You sacrificed your wrist for our team. And I would just like to say to our listeners, I would advise not to do that. Uh, I'm actually, I'm personally the type of person where it's like I take injuries pretty seriously. So like the moment I started feeling this pain in my elbow, I just flat out stopped all activity. I just didn't do anything. I even stopped like doing any sort of gym exercises that would like involve lifting with my arm at all. And it still took a while to heal up. So I think it's really important that you do need to take this rest to heal up because you could potentially permanently affect yourself, right? I always worry about that for myself. Like if I don't take this seriously and heal up, I could maybe not play again without pain.
I think that's the smart thing for sure. And I think we've seen I think both of us have seen with other players, it's not unusual to like hear players complaining about how their shoulder or their elbow or their wrist or their knees are hurting,
Yep.
you know? So yeah, it's definitely important, something to keep in mind on. Now, one question for you, Jeremiah, is like, what do you think caused kind of your tennis elbow? I mean, do you think it was just overuse, using it too much, or do you think like your technique contributed to it, or anything like that?
So funny enough, I actually thought in the beginning, I thought it was because I had a new mouse that I use for work. Because I got one of those like ergonomical mice, whatever, and then the ones that like stand straight up at like 90 degrees. So it's like, oh, is this aggravating my arm or something like that? Anywho, I eventually concluded it was the table tennis because there was like a specific angle that it would really trigger like this sharp stabbing pain to the back of my hand. And I think it came down to I was practicing a lot of backhand, which also used a lot of wrist. Like I was trying to do backhand flicks, and I was probably doing this 3 times a week for many hours, probably at least 3 hours. And I think just over time it built up and until my arm gave up. So
Okay.
that's what I think happened. All I care about is I'm so happy that it's starting to recover. I'm feeling, less pain. Now the question is, when do I get back in? I'm thinking I can probably start now, but I should take it easy. I don't want to jump in right away.
Okay, so you're saying that you would do these practice sessions like up to 3 hours, and basically the whole practice session, you were just focused on your backhand flick.
A backhand flick or just like backhand drive in general, but a lot
Okay.
of backhand. Trying to
Okay.
like normally I'm a like predominantly forehand player, right? So I practice forehand all the time, and that didn't seem to be too big a deal. But I guess doing all the backhands, I think that was like the main driver for getting the tennis elbow. It could very well be that my technique is really not that great on the backhand, and I do see that, which is why I work on it. Are there any other injuries you've experienced? I have actually had more than just this tennis elbow.
Wait, really? I don't remember other
You don't
things. So
remember?
for
I
me,
had
I
knee
don't think so.
problems.
Okay.
Yeah, so I used to have knee problems. So as you know, when you go to do like a forehand loop, you gotta like, well, for me especially, I'm really tall. I'm 6'5" audience, so I have to get down really low. And I think just the repeated motion of having to like drop down and get up, drop down and get up so I can loop, it aggravated my knee. And just one day while I was playing, I heard like a pop sound, and it turned into like, oh, that's not good. So that I did go to the doctor, and the doctor said, you're perfectly fine. Yeah. So
Okay.
I kept experiencing pain like when I dropped down like to a certain degree, like at a certain angle. So I was like, oh, okay, this has to be like, I don't know, ACL problems or something. That's not good. But the doctor said, no, I'm okay. I just have really weak glute muscles. So he put me through physical therapy, and that actually solved the problem. So
Okay.
in conclusion, make sure you work on your physical health so that you can keep playing.
And so the physical therapy, was that just working on building up those specific muscles?
Pretty much.
Okay.
So it just started like with single leg exercises, just like using all their machines and stuff like that and balancing, and then also working on your core. Because I think that also contributes to, your ability to do these really quick lateral movements, right? And then from there, it got better, but it took months. And I think that's another thing that players really don't like with injury is no matter how minor it is, you could be out for months, and you should really not play until you've recovered.
Yeah, so that definitely makes sense. So basically some physical therapy and working on those muscles. And I think that's consistent. I don't do much physical activity now, but back when I was running, I was like increasing the amount I was running. And I remember like in my knee, I started feeling some pain. And then the doctor actually told me to just like work out my strengthen my leg muscles. And it totally worked. So I think that's like a similar thing. So yeah, I think maybe sometimes, you feel some things, and maybe we can say you're a little lucky in terms of like it's not really a major fix if you just slow down and assess, what's going on.
Yeah, I'm always worried when it comes to pretty much any pain that it's going to be some sort of long-lasting thing that is just a part of my life now. But I really feel like when it comes to injury, we can conclude that if you're experiencing any pain, you should probably stop what you're doing and get that figured out, whether it's go to the doctor or maybe you have to rest. You shouldn't aggravate whatever pain you're experiencing any further, whether it be shoulder, knee, elbow, pinky toe. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we should say is like the thing that we both experienced is we started getting that pain when we were like really ramping up our practice, and I think that can be one thing to keep in mind. Like we aren't professional athletes, so if we're going from like no activity or limited activity and suddenly we're playing like table tennis 10 or 15 hours a week, naturally as adults that could trigger something in our bodies. So maybe that's something else to keep in mind as well, kind of easing into it. I think this happens to a lot of people that get really into table tennis and they're really motivated, right at the beginning, and maybe they're going a little bit overboard in practice and maybe even magnifying. Maybe, you don't have the best technique yet. So maybe you're doing something a little weird.
Yes.
That's unnatural, especially with these, like, how table tennis is, like the strokes are kind of small and like it's a little bit an unnatural motion. So, your body's not used to that. Magnified if you're doing something a little weird, putting your body under your joints under weird stress, can definitely lead to some pain there.
So what you're saying is while you're resting up to recover for your pain, maybe reassess your technique to make sure that that's not the driving force.
Yeah. Okay. So Jeremiah, you mentioned maybe you're going to get back into the game soon. So what's your plan? What's your plan to get back?
I'll probably just start like once a week, go back to the club on the weekend. But I probably won't do like coaching sessions or like really intense practice sessions, right? Probably take more breaks, just assess how is my elbow feeling when I'm playing, because I'm sure there's this like fine line where I think it's recovered, but as soon as I start, it'll probably start to aggravate it. And if that starts to happen, I will probably just slow down and potentially take another month off. We'll see. I was reading that it can take up to like 6 months, maybe longer to recover. But Hey, at least I didn't need surgery. That's all I'm really happy about. That's the game plan.
All right. Well, makes sense. So hope you enjoyed our discussion on injuries and maybe learned a little bit from our experiences. So for now, let's move on to our next segment, the Chump Moment of the Month.
Oh, right. I forget we do this now. Well, I can start off right now. I don't have a moment. I haven't been playing for a while, so that's me. I'm covered, folks. It's up to Michael now to entertain you. Tell us a story, funny man.
All right. So what I thought of for my Chump Moment of the Month. So to describe my past few months, I've been a little bit busy, haven't been playing as much, not as much as those plans that we discussed at the beginning of the year. But I recently went back to the club for the first time in a few months. I had a few sessions with a practice partner, but overall unfortunately haven't been playing as much as I hoped to. Now going back to the club, I did find I was doing pretty decently, better than I expected. I worked some on my technique stuff, particularly with my forehand. I've been talking about that a lot through the podcast and working on that a lot this year. But one thing that made me feel like a chump is something that Jeremiah, you joked about, I think when we were talking about our plans, which is like, yeah, you're going to work a lot on that one thing, your weakness, and you're going to get that better. But then what happens, right? Then
Everything
those other
else.
aspects of your game that you have been focusing on are all crap, So I was in the club and I'm like blocking with my backhand just in the warm up. And I just like cannot place the ball in the same place. It's like all over the place. I'm like, oh, sorry. I shot the ball off to the other side of the table. I'm like, sorry. I was saying like, sorry, so many times during the warm up. Just like totally, I just like couldn't control the ball with my backhand.
I think it's at this point, this is where you say like, oh, sorry, I have an injury. My wrist isn't feeling that great. So I swear I'm not this bad. There's your way out, Michael.
So yeah, that's my chump moment. Just that focusing on one thing is important, but also you kind of need to, I don't know. I don't even know how to say it. I don't know what's the best thing, but I feel like
play 8 hours a day.
Yeah, kind of. Also, I need to focus on my overall, like just drilling both on the robot and with my practice partner, like drilling the basics, like for at least a few minutes, even if I'm going to focus on one thing. I think that'll probably help. So I'll probably try to do that. Probably try to get on my robot for a few sessions before I go back to the club and focus on like my overall backhand down the line, backhand, cross court, also like pushing and stuff. Just focus on all around, in addition to the extra focus time that I have on my forehand topspin, basically. So
yeah, that's the difficulty of this game. It's all these things that you need to work on. You need to give a dedicated slot of time to, and there's only so many hours in the day. So unless you're a professional athlete that can spend at least 6 to 8 hours, it's tough. It is tough. And then of course, you spend more time, you get injured. So but all right, I think that's it. That is the chump moment of the month.
All right. Well, Jeremiah, so it's been a good episode talking about our injuries, talking about what we've done to deal with them, and trying to give some advice to the fellow chumps out there. Of course, take or leave that advice as you guys desire.
Yeah, I think the main piece of advice is just rest. And then, of course, if it's serious enough, obviously go to a doctor and get their professional opinion. Don't just do what I did and go on the internet and hope to make the connection between your symptoms and what you think it is. Go to a doctor. All right, that's it, folks. That has been, Table Tennis Chump to Champ.
And we'll see you again next month.